Okay, well, that was a disaster. Michigan blows a 19-3 lead. They were 3 or 4 yards away from making it 26-3. They give up 23 consecutive points. They turn the ball over 4 times. That led directly to points or keeping them from scoring points. South Carolina, I don't want to go too heavy on the hyperbole that it was a devastating loss for Michigan. They will still have a very talented football team come back next year, and they will have 9 months to forget about this and move on to Notre Dame in the season opener. And for South Carolina, I don't necessarily want to call this a program building win because they were already on their way, going from 3-9 to 6-7 to winning 8 regular season games this year. But it was demoralizing for Michigan. This is going to stay with them. They still have not proven that they can beat a good team in a big spot. And so this is going to stay with this team that beat no one this year and played well in spots and stood up to the challenges of Wisconsin and Ohio State and some other teams like Michigan State, a game that they should have won as well at home, and this one that they should have won. Really, the only team that manhandled them was Penn State, but they blew it. Mark Rogers TV with instant analysis. I've opened up the group chat, and maybe I'm not doing this correctly, so somebody please let me know, and I'll try to find out, because when I do these instant analysis pieces, I would love to be able to answer questions and respond to your comments and your insight as well. So South Carolina comes back to defeat Michigan. What was the score? 26-19. Brian Edwards was a man in this game. He's a guy that from his debut against Vanderbilt on a Thursday night on the road as a freshman, I've liked. He was targeted 40% of the time after Deebo Samuel went down the third game of the season. All right. The first quarter plus was exactly what we thought we would get out of this game, that the defenses would dominate, the offenses would look ugly, that they would look confused and overwhelmed, and that the Michigan defense in particular was this good. And they are really, really good despite this loss. But then the offenses got it together, and with a myriad of fumbles and turnovers, it turned into a very entertaining game. Not a well-played game necessarily, but an entertaining game. Because in the first quarter, the first 5 or 6 series of the game, you had the likes of DJ Brunson blitzing and coming off the edge, darting through gaps in the line and wreaking havoc on Brandon Peters. Mo Hurst was a force. Khaleke Hudson forced a 3-and-outs as well on third down potential conversions. You had 3 awful Michigan punts that cost them field position. The one allowed South Carolina to start at its own 37 and then start at the Michigan 41. And because of those awful punts, Michigan had to start its first 2 drives at its own 12 and its own 4 because of the awful punting by Michigan. Well, Chris Lamons, he muffed a punt, botched the punt. That turned it over to Michigan. They didn't really move the ball. Quinn Nordine kicked the field goal to make it 3-0. And then you had the mesh point fumble between Jake Bentley and A.J. Turner. And Chase Winovich recovered that at the South Carolina 31. Again, the Gamecocks defense did its job despite a face mask penalty on the quarterback, Brandon Peters. That extended the drive, still made it just a field goal as South Carolina stiffened in the red zone, 6-0. TJ Brunson continued to make athletic plays. He stopped another Michigan drive with a sack. It was 9-3 at half. Okay, this is when the game started to move along and started to give us something. Brandon Peters started to get into a groove, move the ball downfield, started to chuck it downfield. They started to go play action and move it downfield. They had a nifty sideline run from Karan Higdon. He was given the ball left, had a defender in his face, juked him, and left him. That, I believe that was Lamons as well, who almost made the play in the backfield for like a 5-yard loss, but Karan Higdon juked him, went down the sideline, and that set up the touchdown, 16-3. So Michigan's off to a 16-3 lead. They got it out to 19-3. Okay, Jake Bentley. looking good on this particular series. Threw one down the seam and finally got Hayden Hurst into the ball game. But ball was deflected by Furbush. That's what led to the next field goal to make it 19-3. Sorting through my notes here. Got a 3rd and 10 conversion to Donovan Peoples-Jones. DJ Smith was called for targeting. Javon Kinlaw, though, with the strip on Karan Higdon. There's your game right there. So Michigan's up 19-3. Peters is moving the ball through the air. I know that the narrative from this game is going to be that he had an awful game. And yes, he made the big mistakes and had 2 awful drives at the end, or would-be drives when Michigan needed scores. But at this point in the game, they were starting to move it. They got the big play to Donovan Peoples-Jones on a 3rd and 11 conversion. DJ Smith got called for the targeting. Michigan's inside the 5. They're up 19-3. They're in to take it 26-3, and Javon Kinlaw creates the strip. Lamont with the fumble recovery, and there you go. South Carolina finally gets some juice going in the offense. Hayden Hurst gets involved. Bentley gets outside the pocket. They had to get him outside the pocket. I know that he loves to stay in the pocket and deliver the ball. He's a pass-first quarterback. But he does have good wheels, and they needed to get him outside that Michigan pass rush that was devastating. Beautiful option play that was the touchdown, the first touchdown for South Carolina on the board, with Bentley optioning to Rico Dowdle, who has been nicked up in recent times here. Number 78 for South Carolina. Forgot to look him up. He just wiped out the right side of the offensive front and buried 2 guys, and that gave Dowdle enough room to shake and bake some guys downfield and score the touchdown. Should not have gone for the 2-point play. All right, you're down 19-3. You score a touchdown. It's 19-9. There's still plenty of time. I know that this is not an offensive shootout, and there may not be many scores. And 19-11 with the 2-point conversion gets you within 1 score and another 2-point conversion. You're still chasing points at this point in the game. It's the 3rd quarter. Michigan makes a dumb move here in putting the ball in the hands of a guy that's not used to taking a handoff. Sean McEwen, their tight end, lines up in the backfield as an H-back, tight end, whatever he was. He fumbles. They're up 19-9. They don't want to do anything stupid. They have 2 very capable backs in Evans and Higdon, who were running the ball pretty well. They give the ball to McEwen. He doesn't know how to take the handoff. They botch the handoff. South Carolina just scored a touchdown. They get the ball back on the fumble. Bentley hits Brian Edwards. Beautiful play as Bentley threw it over the safety, and Edwards beat his man. So Bentley had to lead Edwards, but also not throw it too high and out of the back of the end zone. Ball was about 2 to 3 yards inside the goal line. Beautiful throw, 19-16 right there. South Carolina was rocking at that point. Hayden Hurst, next time South Carolina gets the ball, 3rd and 17, makes a great hands catch, high points the football. Hurst had 3 catches for 41 yards. We're at about 12 minutes left in the game. Bentley, 53 yards then to Shi Smith, who torched Tyree Kinnell, the Michigan safety, and then the other Michigan safety, as they pointed out in the broadcast. So South Carolina had 2 wides to the left. They either had 1 or 2 wide receivers to the right, but the deal was that they had the formation near the right sideline. They were on the right hash, so they had all this space to the left. So Michigan had one-on-one guys on islands covering South Carolina's wide receivers to the left. The safety, for some unknown reason, with all that congestion to his left, opted to go to that side, leaving those 2 Michigan defensive backs and Kinnell in particular out to dry. Shi Smith burned him for 53 yards, and there you go. There's your first lead of the game for the South Carolina Gamecocks. All right, the face mask on the next Michigan drive knocks out Brandon Peters. He leaves the game for a few plays. Michigan fans were holding their breath because we know how awful John O'Korn has been this season. In particular, if you watch the Ohio State game, he basically, I don't want to say anybody lost a game. He was awful in that game. So Peters leaves for a few plays. O'Korn actually completed a few passes, got them down the field, and then Peters makes the awful mistake. Their first and goal. On this particular play, yes, it was the first and goal play. He rolls left. He gets caught up in traffic. He gets blasted and tries to deliver the ball to Donovan Peoples-Jones, who had his issues throughout this game as well. And South Carolina holds, and we still have a 23-19 game. Michigan holds them. They get the punt. Donovan Peoples-Jones completely mistracks the football, doesn't track the football, hits him on the face mask at the 10-yard line. The Michigan defense, to its credit, put in awful situations the entire game, really just gave up the 53-yard play. And I know the South Carolina offense took advantage of the field position, but it was the Michigan defense and the offense and special teams that really hurt them in this game. In this particular play, Peoples-Jones off the face mask. The freshman is a tremendous playmaker, bright future, but just a day he wants to forget here. Muffs the punt. Michigan holds South Carolina to the field goal, though, inside the 10-yard line, 26-19. They're still in the game. Okay, somebody's got to enlighten me to Michigan's approach to the next drive. There's about 2 minutes left to play. No, there's about 3.5 minutes. No. Trying to think, because yes, there is all of about 3.5 minutes left to play because they could have punted, but they opted to go 4 and out on this particular drive. They went 4 and out, and the last play had no concept to it whatsoever. They chucked it down the field to a receiver with 2 guys on him. Michigan forces the 3 and out. South Carolina gives it up very quickly. They had the timeouts to burn. South Carolina misses the game-winning field, or the field goal that would have iced the game from 49 yards. Kicker 3 for 11, going for a 49-yarder. That questionable as well. Michigan gets another shot with $1:45 left to play. This is what I question, in addition to the awful play calling of the previous series, was the 3rd and 1. You've got a 3rd and 1 after Peters scrambles for yardage, and they throw the little inside play with all that traffic. The ball gets batted down, and then Peters throws that awful play in which the corner had the angle and undercut the ball, and Steve Montack intercepted it to end the game. But 3rd and 1, they needed a first down. They had $1:40 on the clock, and they just didn't get the first down. They were chucking the ball all over the place. Brandon Peters, 20 of 44 for $186. 2 costly interceptions in this game. South Carolina, let's focus on the positive. 3-9, 6-7, now 9-4 after an upset win over an 8-point favorite in Michigan. So South Carolina, in looking at its schedule next year, did not schedule the additional difficult non-conference game. So they usually have, of course, Clemson at the end, but schedule somebody like a North Carolina State like they did this past year, North Carolina a couple other times, a difficult second non-conference game. They didn't do that this year. They could get off to a hot start against a weak schedule. They do play Georgia, talking about a weak non-conference schedule, Georgia in week 2. For Michigan, what does it mean? Well, you can't measure the emotions. Emotionally, this seems like a big letdown to a program that is beaten down by Ohio State in particular. Penn State's there as well. Michigan State, we mentioned them getting beat down by Penn State in particular, but having a chances against Michigan State and against Ohio State, but not beating one team with a winning record this year. Michigan lost all its games. You would have expected Florida to be that big non-conference win, and they did win the ball game, but of course Florida was awful this season. So Michigan's got, from a tangible standpoint, from a reasonable, logical standpoint, they have everything in play to be a really good team in 2018, except the schedule doesn't set up well. They've got Wisconsin and Northwestern coming over from the Western Division. They've got to deal with the 3 powers in the Eastern Division, and they open at Notre Dame, and they've got Michigan State and Ohio State on the road. But from the standpoint of building a team, building a roster, building a base, they've got Shea Patterson coming in from Ole Miss to battle Brandon Peters for the quarterback position. They've recruited as well as just about anybody in the country. They have brought in top 5 to 10 recruiting classes. This team was so young, they lost 10 starters on defense from 2016. Their personnel's loaded. They're ready to go. Jim Harbaugh is still the guy making the right moves. Psychologically, though, I don't know what this does on top of Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State, and them not being able to win these games. This has been now 3 consecutive years. They're 1-5 against Michigan State and Ohio State. They did beat Penn State 2 years ago when we thought Penn State was marginal. Now they got drubbed by Penn State this year. And now they don't appear to be nearly as good as Wisconsin, and they're going to have to face the Badgers again next year. So if you're looking at the personnel on the roster versus 3 years ago, and if you're looking at a guy in play that has done it at San Diego State, Stanford, and with the San Francisco 49ers, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. The resurrection the process that he has undertaken at those 3 programs is astonishing. I'll just highlight San Francisco. 2-14 before he got there, took them to the brink of a Super Bowl championship. Couldn't throw the ball for Colin Kaepernick. But NFC championship games, 4th or 5th best record in the history of the NFL. So the man can do the job. And he is recruiting and building his roster. Psychologically, he's going to have to take a beating over the next 9 months because his team doesn't hit the field until September. And all it's going to be is you could not beat any good teams and you continue to lose to Ohio State and Michigan State in particular. So Jim Harbaugh is going to have to withstand that. He's going to have to spin it a certain way to continue. And fortunately for him, the recruiting class basically wrapped up for this particular recruiting year. Of course, early signing day has changed that dynamic. And he doesn't have to do a huge sales job for the next 7 or 8 months immediately toward the class of 18. But for that class of 2019, he will have some work to do to convince those young men that Michigan is still on the rise to be elite again. My thoughts on Michigan football, South Carolina, of course, Georgia's a juggernaut, it appears. But other than that, they would seem to be the second best program in the division right now. Barry Odom doing some good things at Missouri, but they do not have the recruiting base to compete with South Carolina. South Carolina, they can keep some of that talent home and wrestle some guys away from Florida and Georgia. In those states, Will Muschamp has something good going at South Carolina. 3 wins to 6-9. My thoughts on Michigan, South Carolina, would love to hear from you now on Mark Rogers TV.